It was early spring when Liam Carter, seasoned climber known among his friends for chasing dangerous and little-known routes, found himself drawn to the remote cliffs of Redstone Ridge. The ridge a jagged line of granite jutting sharply into. The sky had earned a reputation among local climbers as treacherous but mesmerizing. Its craggy spires and sheer faces seemed to defy gravity, daring anyone with enough skill or perhaps enough recklessness to challenge them. Liam had heard stories from older climbers about unusual formations and hidden crevices that might contain the remnants of old mines or secret hideouts, but he had dismissed them as local folklore. That is, until he arrived that morning, the sun just beginning to peek over the horizon. Casting a pale orange glow across the ridgeline, Liam's backpack was meticulously packed, as always, with ropes, carabiners, harnesses, water, and energy bars. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth from the melting snow above. He felt the familiar rush of anticipation, the mix of fear and exhilaration that only comes when standing at the base of a cliff that promises both beauty and danger. He adjusted his helmet, checked his harness one last time, and began his ascent. The climb started smoothly. Liam's hands and feet found their places in the familiar cracks and ledges. The granite was cold and rough against his palms, but it offered enough grip to allow him to move steadily upward. No one else dared these cliffs in early spring, when hidden ice and loose rock could easily spell disaster. About halfway up, as he navigated a particularly narrow section, Liam noticed something unusual. A part of the cliff face seemed different. The rock here was darker, almost blackened, and smooth in a way that did not match the surrounding granite. There was a small indentation, barely noticeable, almost like a door that had been intentionally carved but left unmarked. Curiosity sparked within him. Liam paused, hanging from his rope, peering at the shadowed recess. He reached out, brushing away dirt and loose stones, revealing a handle embedded into the rock. It was rusted but clearly functional. Liam's pulse quickened. A hidden door in a cliff. He had read about secret mine entrances and abandoned smuggler hideouts, but he had never actually encountered one. Carefully, he tugged at the handle. It resisted at first, then creaked as it slowly swung inward, revealing a dark cavity behind it. For a moment, Liam hesitated. He was alone, high above the ground, and venturing into an unknown space could be dangerous in ways beyond physical injury. But the thrill of discovery outweighed caution. He clipped a light to his harness, pulled a small flashlight from his pocket, and squeezed through the narrow opening. The interior was cold and musty, with the faint scent of decay and damp stone. It was wider than he expected, forming a small tunnel that led deeper into the cliff. The walls were rough, as though carved by hand, and the floor was uneven, littered with debris that crunched under his boots. Liam's flashlight beam danced across the tunnel, revealing strange markings etched into the stone symbols that he didn't recognize. Angular lines that seemed almost ritualistic. He moved cautiously, every step echoing eerily in the confined space. The air grew colder the deeper he went, and an oppressive silence settled around him. Then, about 20 meters in, the tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber. Liam stopped, his breath catching. The chamber was enormous, much larger than any natural cavity he had seen. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, dripping water into shallow pools on the floor, and the walls were covered with layers of soot and grime. But it was what lay in the center of the chamber that froze him in place. At first, he thought it was a pile of rocks. Then, as his flashlight beam shifted, he realized it was not rock at all. It was human. Skeletons, dozens of them arranged, in a manner that suggested more than just abandonment. Some were seated, as if resting. Others were lying sprawled across the floor. Their clothing, tattered and rotten, hinted that they had been there for decades, perhaps longer. Liam's stomach turned. How could this many people end up in a hidden chamber in the middle of a cliff, and why had no one discovered them before? He moved closer. His flashlight revealed more horrifying details. The walls were covered in the same strange symbols he had seen in the tunnel. Some of the skeletons had remnants of chains attached to their wrists and ankles. Others were positioned unnaturally, as though they had been arranged deliberately. There were scraps of journals, brittle and yellowed with age, scattered across the floor. Liam picked up one, handling it with trembling fingers. The pages were filled with frantic writing, accounts of people taken or lured into the cliff, some desperate, some resigned. Mentions of an unknown figure watcher who had controlled this hidden enclave. Directing its inhabitants with cruel authority sent a chill down his spine. Suddenly, a low sound echoed through the chamber like a whisper carried on. The wind. Liam froze, straining his ears. There was nothing outside the tunnel, no breeze that should have caused it, yet it persisted. The sound seemed to come from the shadows themselves. He shined his flashlight around the cavern, catching a movement in the corner of his eye. Something shifted in the darkness, too quick to identify, yet unmistakably deliberate. His heart hammered in his chest. "Hello," he called, his voice sounding small and fragile in the vast chamber. No response, only the echo of his own words. Liam realized with sudden dread that he was not alone. Instinctively, he turned to leave, but the tunnel seemed longer, more labyrinthine than before. It was as if the cliff itself had shifted while he was distracted. Panic began to set in, cold and sharp, as the whispering noises grew louder, more distinct. Liam's flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, he felt a presence behind him. Something was watching, waiting. He swung the light back toward the shadows and caught a glimpse of a figure tall. Thin, shrouded in tattered black cloth, its face obscured. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the echo of that faint whisper. "You shouldn't be here." Liam's mind raced. He had climbed countless cliffs, explored caves and tunnels, but nothing had ever made him feel so utterly helpless. Adrenaline surged, and he bolted back toward the entrance, stumbling over debris and skeletal remains. The figure did not pursue, but the whispers followed, growing louder, more insistent, chanting words that he could not understand. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, he emerged from the door onto the cliff face. Sunlight had shifted, casting long shadows over the granite. Liam clung to the rock, gasping for breath, sweat and blood mixing on his hands from the rough granite. He looked back at the small, innocuous door in the cliff. It was just a seam in the rock now, ordinary, unassuming, as if mocking him for believing it had any significance. Shaken, he began his descent. Every step was careful, methodical, yet his mind refused to stop replaying the images from the chamber. The skeletons, the chains, the symbols, the whispering figure, all of it haunted him. Once on solid ground, he stumbled back to his car, hands trembling as he fumbled with his gear. The remote trailhead was silent, the forest around him oblivious to the horrors hidden above. Back in his apartment that evening, Liam scoured the internet, trying to find any mention of the hidden chamber or similar discoveries in Redstone Ridge. There were legends of lost miners, disappeared hikers, even rumors of cult activity, but nothing concrete. No records of dozens of missing people linked to the cliff. It was as if the chamber had existed entirely outside history. He considered contacting authorities, but hesitated. How could he explain what he had found without sounding insane? More importantly, was it safe to alert anyone about it? Sleep came fitfully. In the dark hours, he dreamt of the chamber, the skeletons reaching for him with cold, bony hands, the whispers growing louder, the figure watching him from the shadows. When he awoke, the memory of the fear was fresh, gnawing at him like a physical ache. Days turned into weeks, but the image of the hidden chamber refused to fade. Liam found himself drawn back to the cliff, despite every rational instinct screaming at him to stay away. He had to understand. He had to know who or what had created that place. Armed with a rope, a more powerful flashlight, and a small camera, he returned to Redstone Ridge. Determined to document the chamber this time, the climb was more dangerous than before. Snow had partially melted, leaving the granite slick and treacherous. His muscles ached from exertion, yet he pushed forward, driven by a compulsion he didn't fully understand. When he reached the door, he paused, taking a deep breath before sliding it open. The tunnel welcomed him once again, its darkness even more oppressive than before. As he ventured deeper, he noticed something had changed. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly in the flashlight beam, a sickly yellow-green hue that made the cavern seem alive. The skeletal remains were no longer scattered randomly. They were positioned in a rough circle as if anticipating his arrival, and at the center of the circle, the figure waited, taller than before, shrouded in shadows, its presence commanding and terrifying.